Hey everyone. First off, welcome to my big fat video blog. I know it has been a while since I put out a new video, and I think it's been about a month and a half. So first off, I apologize for anybody who has been wanting content. I haven't been able to really update my content. I really don't have a good excuse for it. Unfortunately, I just sort of kind of got caught up in like this rut where, with the quarantine, I really was kind of depressed. But there's also another reason that I didn't really update my videos. So basically, I have been addicted 100% to two games within the month of April, both on PS4. Um, the first one, as you can see from my shirt here, um, is Resident Evil 3 for the remake for PS4. It's also, I think, on Xbox too. Um, it is fantastic. A lot of people really hate this game. I really love it. So I thought would really be a cool idea is in the past, typically I do like my fatty videos where I talk about cooking or I have my shirt off or, I talk about things with the community, which is cool, but at a point, you kind of run out of ideas of things to talk about. So I thought it might be a really cool idea is to do a video game review for both Resident Evil 3 Remake, which I'm currently enjoying, and then also Final Fantasy 7 Remake, which is the other game I'm going to talk about. So, yeah, so I feel like that might be a good idea. And some of you may not like this video, and I totally get that. But I wanted to at least put some content out there and let you know what I've been up to. So the first thing is Resident Evil 3. So if you've played the original, well, first off, I'll go over really what Resident Evil is. So it is the game that pretty much, to some extent, invented what's called the survival horror genre of games. And prior to that, there was a game called Alone in the Dark, which kind of cemented that in the terms of 3D survival horror back in the very early 90s. And even prior to that, there was a game for the Nintendo NES called Sweet Home that was released in Japan in the late 80s. And it was based upon a movie, and it was never brought to the States because Capcom and Nintendo felt that the plot was too mature for kids at the time that were really into video games, and they thought that it really wouldn't be a hit here in the States. So, but fun fact, the people that created Resident Evil, the franchise, Shinji Mikami, and there was another producer, I can't remember his name right now, he actually brought he actually developed Sweet Home, and whenever the PlayStation came out, he saw great potential in the PlayStation and said, we need to go ahead and develop a 3D version of Sweet Home, which evolved into Resident Evil, or Biohazard as it's known in Japan. And if you've ever played these games, they deal with a group. The first one deals with a group of individuals. They're from a SWAT team called STARS, which is Special Tactics and Rescue Service. They work in a town called Raccoon City, and they get called out to a mansion in the nearby mountain ranges to investigate cannibalistic attacks. And as a result of that, they end up finding out that, spoiler alert, if you have never played this game, most people have, or most people watch the movies, so this probably won't come too much as a shock. Um, they pretty much go ahead and go into the mansion and find out that there's a laboratory corporation, a lab corporation called Umbrella, that is developing these bioweapons, and they had an accident, and it's a really long story. But in terms of where I'm going with Resident Evil 3 Remake, one of the main characters, Jill Valentine, who is a STARS team member, she wakes up in the midst of this horrible viral outbreak in Raccoon City itself. So it's not the mansion. And over the course of time, you see that she's been dealing with PTSD from her experiences at the mansion. And so, what I really loved about this game is this is probably the main thing that I loved about it, is it really provides a backdrop as to what Jill has been going through since the mansion incident. I think in the original trilogy of games, so Resident Evil 1 through 3, there was that first set of games on the PlayStation. The characters were great, and the action was really great, and I feel that the story premise was really great, but you never really got a chance to really emotionally identify with the characters, because I mean it was the PlayStation and things are very blocky, and they had a very limited way they had to do things. But in the remake, you really start psychologically understanding Jill, especially at the onset. You see that, in the very first several scenes, you see that Jill, her nightstand is filled with like pills because she's trying to drown out the images of the mansion incident with all these zombies and monsters. You see that she's having nightmares where she's turning into a zombie based off of her experiences at the mansion. And so it really just provides um, more of an emotional experience than anything in terms of Jill. You really feel like you can really identify with her character more than before, where she was just some sort of action flick person that was trying to get out of Raccoon City. So the biggest thing within this game is this hulking tank of a monster called Nemesis, and it's the trademark of Resident Evil 3, to be honest. And if you've played Resident Evil 2 Remake, or haven't, I can just fill you in. They started with this stalker dynamic where you have your standard enemies and monsters and stuff, and you've got all the puzzles and eerie environments, but they also have, in Resident Evil 2, this monster that would chase you around called Mr. X. And I know I've talked about this in one of my other videos, but I actually suffered from severe panic attacks, and I actually used Resident Evil 2 Remake to help me beat those panic attacks by way of dealing with Mr. X. And it was a really cool method of therapy that my therapist recommended, and he's like, they've done this for folks that, have been through like the Iraq War and everything. You haven't, but you might benefit from this. And I tried it, and it really did work, which is weird. So playing Resident Evil 3 Remake, coming back to it, I was like, oh, I definitely can do this, and I really enjoyed it. So basically, the premise is that you have to escape Raccoon City and escape from this hulking stalker monster called Nemesis. And through the way, you go through various different parts of the city. There's the main part of the city, like the business district. There's the police station, or near the police station, and then you continue progressing through, and you finally end up in Raccoon City Hospital. And then finally, there's a lab, and you have to go through the lab. And I won't spoil the end, but it's really a cool series and a cool game, and it's a great finish on a great series. The biggest thing, so in the original Resident Evil 3, they had a mode at the end called Mercenaries mode, which was a lot of fun. It was basically like there were some Umbrella operatives in the game that you could play, and then you could go ahead and take those characters that you normally would see in the game and play this like rapid mode where you would be put into an area and you have like 10 minutes to escape a part of Raccoon City. And it actually went really well. That was actually, a lot of people would report that would be the main star of Resident Evil 3. In fact, it was so popular that when Resident Evil 5 was released, they actually released a game that was adjunct to it on the Nintendo DS called Resident Evil Mercenaries 3D because so many people loved that particular part of it. But the nice thing about this particular installment is there's a game that comes with it that's a multiplayer game. Now, I have been really busy with Final Fantasy VII Remake, which I'll talk about here in a second, but I absolutely loved a little bit of Resistance that I played it. So basically, with Resistance, you either play a survivor in Raccoon City who's trying to get out of a test environment that they've been put into by Umbrella. And then you also have the option to play as the mastermind to set up traps within this environment. So things like zombies and the monsters and even Nemesis themselves and Mr. X themselves to put them in that environment. And each one of the masterminds, they have various villains within the series history and some new faces. So, like Albert Wesker, who's the main villain from Umbrella, who is a traitor to Stars. And the original, I think that there's plans to make him a mastermind. But each one of the mastermind has their own like special abilities that allow you to either place more enemies or do things differently to the party members. And so really ultimately the goal is that the survivors need to make it out of the lab. So it is just a really fun game. A lot of critics online have really criticized Resident Evil 3 Remake for being extremely short. That is true. It is only a 6-hour game. I think Capcom intended Resident Evil 3 to be more of like an expansion type of thing to Resident Evil 2 because it uses the same RE engine, which powered Resident Evil 2 Remake. And I think they really meant like they were going to do that, but then also Resident Evil Resistance was going to make up the other portion of the money you were spending on the game. So it can, if you're just into the single player experience, it can be a little disappointing in the sense of if you're looking for some long enthralling adventure, you're not going to get that here. It is very much a one shot, but it is a one shot that is extremely well crafted in that it respects your time. If I think, I'm 36, and I think anybody that's around my age and who's working and who's got a lot of stuff going on in their life, it's really hard to play a game that's like 40, 50 hour sprawling adventure whenever you're, busy with work and other things, or if you have kids, that too. So it's really fun while it lasts. And it's one of those things that has a really high amount of replayability to a point where it's just fun to play. There are so many games out there where they just focus on just jamming a bunch of content into the game and not really allowing you to experience the game again in a way that's just like fun. Like it's one of those games like I just want to like kill some time and turn on this game and kill a bunch of zombies and blow off some heads of some monsters. Let's go ahead and just do that. It's a very, very quick acting game. So in short, I highly recommend it. I give it 3 rotting thumbs out of 4. I think that if you've played the other Resident Evils, like Resident Evil 2, Resident Evil 2 Remake, Resident Evil 4, Resident Evil 5, and 6, you will definitely feel at home with Resident Evil 3. It uses the same type of control scheme to a point. Jill has some really cool abilities like being able to roll out of the way of zombies and do this like last minute dash feature where she can get out of the way. And the story is generally comparable to, the PlayStation 1 version. It's got a few areas that were cut out of it, but for good reason. The areas that they cut out of it in the PlayStation 3 version were actually really filler areas in PlayStation 1, because they were on a budget and they were trying to get it out as quick as possible. So yeah, I would definitely recommend it. If you're really into the short, like single player experience and you're not wanting to do the multiplayer, I would probably wait until it comes down a little bit. Just because you are only getting a 6 to 8 hour game, but like I said, it has an extremely high amount of replayability. And also, if you're a really huge fan of Resident Evil, I would definitely just get it now. I have to say, it's probably one of the most well polished entries in the franchise because it really focuses on the quality of the experience and not necessarily the quantity of it. But yeah, and it takes more of an action focused approach. And I think that's one of the things that I've really enjoyed by the developer Capcom is that in the past several installments, they've tried to give the player something different with each installment. So I think they really learned from Resident Evil 6, and in that game, there was a lot of emphasis on like trying to cram as much experience for each type of player as much as possible into one game, and it was kind of a mess, and it cost Capcom a bunch of money that they ended up losing. And so I think what they're doing now is they're releasing different Resident Evils, but within those Resident Evils, they're focusing on different kinds of experiences. So, like with Resident Evil 7, that was fully solely focused on like environmental horror and like tensity of an environment. It was like a slow burn horror, where Resident Evil 2 focused on more of an environmental horror aspect, and Resident Evil 3 is all action. It is like in your face from the very beginning. You are like running through Raccoon City. You are trying to get out. You feel like you're constantly being pursued. It's just a relentless white knuckle ride. So yeah, I definitely would recommend it to anybody who's into action adventure games. And yeah, so that is that game. So the second game that I've been playing, and this is the one that's taken up most of my time in the month of April, is Final Fantasy VII Remake. So as you can see behind me, you might see a poster for FF7 Remake. I actually have been following this game for a really long time. I went ahead and I've been really following FF7 Remake since it was announced that it was being done by Capcom back in like 2010, 2011, where Square Enix, the main developer of Final Fantasy VII, basically said, we're going to go ahead and remake this game on the PlayStation, and we're going to put it onto the PlayStation 3. And so everyone was really excited for that. And then they came back and said, no, we really want to go ahead and wait and put it on the PlayStation 4. And then there was like 4 or 5 years where there was just nothing about this game. Like everybody just assumed it was shelved, it wasn't gonna happen. They were focusing on Kingdom Hearts and a few of their other franchises, Final Fantasy 14 and 15. And so Final Fantasy 7 Remake just went into like development hell and nobody ever heard of it. And just to catch up people that really aren't game savvy, Final Fantasy is a series of RPGs, role playing games, that are across various consoles. But they all kind of deal with one element, and that it's basically the final fantasy for this planet, and there's a group of adventurers that have to save the world. It's extremely cliche in the terms of the mainline story for all these individual entries, but each of the individual entries has its own story, and those stories often aren't cliche. They're very developed and very evolved, and some of them can really mess you up emotionally. Like if you really want to like cry, play Final Fantasy XIV, the online game, which I've talked about in my other videos, and play Shadowbringers, and yeah, by the end of it, you'll be a sobbing baby on the couch. So yeah, they're just Square Enix, in my opinion. I'm a total fanboy of Square Enix. Mostly every title that I own is Square Enix. They own Tomb Raider now, which I'm a big fan of. So I just love Square Enix to death. When I went to the Penny Arcade Expo last year, I actually spent most of my time at the Square Enix kiosk. So I spent about probably 4 or 5 hours there just trying out all their new games and talking with fans and buying merchandise. But one of the things that I got to experience at PAX was the Resident Evil Remake demo. In fact, if you see behind me, there's a ticket there for the demo. And it was really cool. They had this like beautiful experience that you got to go through at the Penny Arcade Expo with Final Fantasy VII inspired line jockeys, and it was super cool, and I was really happy to play that demo. I was very fortunate. But long story short, this game I would highly recommend to anybody who does want a long, enthralling adventure that you can go into and just be engrossed in for hours. And if you have never played the original, so the original game is on PlayStation 1 and also was released for PlayStation 3, and then there were various remasters of it on PC and Switch. Um, it's a game that really deals with it's a very complicated. It was written by Hironobu Sakaguchi, and it was also co-written by a guy named Yoshinori Kitase, which, if you've played Kingdom Hearts is very convoluted. So I won't go really into the plot too much because that would be a whole like hour. But essentially, the overall plot is that there's this thing that a meteor that came down. There's a thing within the meteor, and that thing spawns. There's some scientific experiments that happen from this evil corporation called Shinra. And it's so funny because like in both of these games that I'm playing, they both deal with like evil corporations, and I'm like that's just pretty much where we're at as a society right now. And it's so funny because on a side note, these games came out during the time of me growing up. And so, like, all these corporations now are like, why are all these young people so liberal? And it's like, because we were brought up to fucking hate corporations and, like, evil corporate greed and all of that shit, rightly so. But it's just really funny. But yeah, the 90s was filled with fuck corporations. Yeah, so in that particular game, you play as Cloud Strife, and he is a mercenary that worked for Shinra's private security division called Soldier. And it's a really long story from there, but the main villain is a guy known as Sephiroth, and Sephiroth is a prior soldier that used to work with Cloud, and that's all I will say from there. If you played the original, then you know how that story ends. But Final Fantasy VII Remake is an experience all on its own. It actually expands upon the lore of Final Fantasy VII in a way that's really unique. I really wouldn't even just go call it a remake. It's really a reimagining. It takes the base story of Final Fantasy VII and just greatly expands upon it, and it adds all of these new things. And just to let you know, if you play the original, it really only takes place in the first part of the game, which is in the city of Midgar, which is a massive city that is built on like a plate, and so underneath it is like all the people that are lower class and can't really afford anything, and they're surrounded by large amounts of like scrap heap and garbage that's being tossed down from the plate above, and then everybody that's like high class lives on the plate if they work for Shinra. And so it's just, it shows you like there's so many themes within this game that really apply to like modern day, life, like, poverty, injustice, income inequality, corporate fascism. I mean, eco-terrorism, disrespect for the planet. There's so many themes in Final Fantasy VII that are so relevant to the issues that are going on today that playing Final Fantasy VII now compared to when I was younger is just, it's like playing something that I'm like, oh, like this is something that like feels real right now. Even though it deals with like magic and evil like meteor monsters, it feels very real. So in terms of the mechanics, it plays a little bit like the Kingdom Hearts games if you've ever played those. It's very much like you control a character or a series of characters on a battlefield, and each one of them you're able to choose various attack, magic capabilities. There's a system called Materia where you can use that to lock into your weapons, to use various types of magic like fire and lightning. Every one of the enemies, or a majority of them, have a ability or an kind of a thing where if they're ice based and use fire, they'll die faster. They have a weakness against it. So it is just a really fantastic game, and I really won't say too much about it, but I think in the original they focused you just wanting to get out of Midgar as fast as possible, explain very basics of the story. Where this here, they really want you to experience every single segment of Midgar, um, and really experience the individual character stories from individual characters, in the various sections of Midgar itself. So I highly recommend it. It is probably one of the greatest games I have ever played. And if you take your time with it, you go through it and you try to go through and find every single secret item, do every single side quest, every single, main quest, really take your time to explore. It'll take you probably about 30 to 40 hours to beat. So it does give you that. And unlike Resident Evil 3, that might not respect your time, but this game, it's lengthy, but it respects your time in a way where the experiences are consistently fresh. And it also, with how it's designed, it encourages exploration. I hate games where I have to explore a bunch of shit, and this game makes me want to explore because of how it is set, how the set pieces and how the environments are built and the maps are built. So I highly recommend it if you have a PS4. As of right now, it's only available on PS4, and the reason is that Square Enix signed an exclusive deal with Sony to only have it on the PlayStation 4, and they haven't really announced any plans to put it on anything else. So if you have Xbox or you have Switch, you're gonna have to get a PS4 to play this one. But I assure you, it is well worth it. So that's pretty much it for this video. I'll probably put out another review video on a few other games that I'm playing. I am playing some older games now that I'm done with these two. One is called Days Gone for PS4, another Sony exclusive. I'm a Sony fanboy, by the way. And then I'm probably going to delve into the Kingdom Hearts series because I've actually played them, but I've never really beat them because they are very convoluted. So now that I've got my Yoshinori Katase brain on from Final Fantasy VII, I might be able to play Kingdom Hearts. So, yeah, so that's all for this video. I plan on putting a little bit more of these ones out. I know they're a deviation from my original content, but I think I'm more in a gamer mood right now, and this is kind of my own little fun blog, so I figure it'd be fun to talk about this stuff. And if I play games on the PC. I would probably do some Twitch streaming too, but I really don't. I'm mostly a PS4 player. I know all you PC people are probably like, you're stupid, but I love my PS4. So, all right, well, that's all for this video. I hope you are all staying safe during the quarantine. I hope you are doing extremely well. I feel, for every one of you that is personally affected by this, I have not been really affected by it. In fact, I'm kind of, I, I guess the only reason way I am being affected by it is that I hate being indoors all the time, which is weird because you would think for a fatty that you would really hate being indoors, but I absolutely am ready for this to be over so I can get my life back. Because even now I'm noticing that, I'm kind of, feeling a little weak because I'm not really getting up and getting out. So, when you're fat, you need to get up and get out and do things in order to keep your muscles going. And so for me, I have to like constantly try to do stuff. So, yeah, so that's how it's affected me. But I see a lot of my friends out there like gaining a bunch of weight, and I'm like, damn it, But I also can't really gain a whole bunch because I have to fit into my work clothes and stuff. So there you have it. So yeah, well, let me know if in the comments if you want any other games reviewed. Happy to do so. And again, I'm sorry if this video wasn't your cup of tea, but I wanted to do something that was a little bit more near and dear to my heart. Anyway, thank you so much and stay safe. Bye.